Hi guys. Today on the Startoon Cartoon Podcast, it's a really big thrill for me to be able to be sharing the room with award-winning actor, the first man ever to play Peter Parker on television, in any format. So the original Spider-Man himself, Mr. Paul Soles.
Hi everyone. Wallop and whipsnappers. That was some intro. By the way, the reason I said that is because that line originated in the TV series. It was never in the comic books.
It's amazing because I'll lead with a digression. The original Superman radio play, Krypton and Kryptonite, and those things all came from that. There's so much stuff that happens when something translates into another medium and then feeds back into those original comics. And that's happening to this day with the big movies that we see today, all that kind of stuff. They're adapting back and forth. But anyhow, I don't want to talk about anything other than that. I mean, we've got you here for a little bit of time, and I want to make sure we're talking to you about some of this. Now, Paul's had a varied career in the animation world and outside of the animation world, primarily, actually. More of your work has been done in live action than in animation. But we've got this thing here that, I mean, you're part of so many of our childhood. With that original performance of Peter Parker, that original performance of Spider-Man. We're going to spend some time on that today, but I do want to also talk to you about yourself and your career and a lot of, and other aspects.
You must.
Should we lead with your secret origin, a little bit of your background before we get to the Spider-Man stuff?
You ask the questions, and I'll try and follow.
Okay. So you're born and raised Toronto?
Yep.
Yeah,
1930.
1930. You can date
Listen,
you that way?
I'm in 3 weeks. I'll be 87, so, you know,
wow.
I suddenly realized last year or this year, that's something to be proud of. I was getting mad about, woe is me, I'm 80. That's an accomplishment. Yeah. So I'm about to celebrate it and not poo-poo it.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Excellent.
No ego there. It's just a matter of, wow, I survived.
Well, happy birthday. I'll give it to you now.
Thank you very much.
Because I probably won't see you in 3 weeks.
No, the party will be going on forever, and you have to get tickets. And anyway.
It'll be, it's one of those affairs.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So you grew up in Toronto. Did you have, what brought you to a career in the arts?
It was a 1938 Chrysler. No. Good luck.
I see how this is going to go.
More than once. Anything I've had happen to me in my life, I've constantly credited to good luck, not good management.
Okay. Just
very damn lucky. And in a very large family, which my mother and dad, my dad had 10 brothers and sisters.
Okay, you're not kidding.
And that group still gets together every year for Jewish holidays, Passover and Hanukkah. And it can be 100 people anymore. And there were fewer on my mother's side, but that's family. And from that family came the man who, in essence, was lucky again by birth to be his cousin, Bernard Cowan, who was a frontline #1 national announcer back in the days in CBC when announcing was a profession and not a bad one. And the announcers who dressed up in tuxedos in front of live audiences for Jack Benny and the quiz shows and this and that, this was a formal calling. So Bunny became active in a variety of activities in Canadian broadcasting and the creative arts. He was one of the co-founders of what eventually became ACTRA, our union, and fought very, very hard for many of the things we didn't have then, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But thanks to Bunny, who took me around to certain broadcasts that he would do, I got interested in broadcasting because our theater was the weekly or daily sitcoms, Jack Benny, Charlie McCarthy, Fred Allen, Fibber McGee and Molly, back in the 30s and 40s. And during the war, the broadcasts of L for Lanky, the story of a Lancaster bomber, this was our theater. except aside from Saturday afternoon matinees, but there was no TV.
Right.
Radio and sound was our theater.
And you were just one of those kids.
And
who...
I was just a natural fan. And
Yeah.
I thought, God, that was exciting and fun. And where I got the idea I might have been able to do something in it, I don't know. Later years in high school, I suppose, a very kind English teacher at Vaughan Road Collegiate, I just found out the other day they were shutting it down. Bye-bye, childhood. Encouraged me to do a play, a live theater play once in a while. So all of these happy happenstances got me going.
Right.
And thanks to the accident of birth to be near Bunny, I was able to get access to what eventually became my professional life.
So you had someone in your family directly. This is something it's interesting because we talked to animators similarly
Yeah.
in that terms of where were the influences that kind of made you.
Sure.
Because a lot of people wouldn't occur to them that you could have a career doing this kind of thing.
That's
a lot of
right.
people come from these places where you go into the government, you go into this, like that's not a real job.
Hey, how many times I could tell you when my father said, "When are you going to get a real job?" I would come home. I'd do overnight shifts on radio when I was in my 20s. He was an early riser, traveling salesman, got up early. Yeah. So I'd come in at 6:30 and he'd be just getting up having breakfast. And he'd look at me and say, "Where the hell have you been? Why don't you get a real job?" Anyway, that's part of the background.
So was there a crossover time from, was there a moment for you when it became a real job, when it became like something that, when did it start really paying the bills?
Well, again, good luck. I was at Western, UWO. When I finished, I was able to get a job because I'd had some summer replacement jobs on radio, doing a standard shift on radio, that the London station, unique in Canada, owned by the London Free Press printing company, owner of the London Free Press newspaper, very serious conservative people, got one of the first TV licenses in Canada in '53. Wow. And they were staffing, I got a job on their radio staff, and then when TV opened in October of '53, I was there, radio on staff, occasional TV. Then after a couple of years, I became full-time staff on TV. Okay. 9 years I spent there and did every kind of show, traveled, innovated, did my first ad libs. One of my first colleagues was Ward Cornell. Some of your people will know. He was on Hockey Night in Canada.
Okay,
He was the voice of the Western Mustangs football team. Fabulous guy and a great voice. So all of this was developing in these fledgling years of the 50s. I learned to fly in London. The manager of the TV station, of the flying club, realized that TV was going to have an influence in the society.
In everything,
culture. So he came to the station and said to the manager, "We'll give one of your people free flying lessons. Get him to his license if you will publicize flying." That's how that took off. Plus the fact that during the war, Second World War, my heroes were all the pilots, were all the flyers. L for Lanky, it was a story of a Lancaster bomber, Canadian Lancaster bomber. So I was inevitably in the orbit of the Royal Canadian Air Force and all of our unique accomplishments in the world as Canadians.
Right.
Anyway, all this was in the frontier. All this was just beginning, and I was lucky enough to be part of it at the beginning.
There is some sense of timing in that kind of way, and when you've got something that is, it's the dawn of the TV era, those kinds of things, and that you were in certainly the right place at the right time. But at the same time, I mean, I know you're saying luck, and yes, we all have some aspect of that in our careers, but you've also got to be in a position to take advantage, or not take advantage, but to capitalize on being in that position.
Yeah, but Mike, the problem with your question or your point is, I didn't do anything, creative to enhance that. I just sat there and went along for the ride. I'm not going to be sorry for it. I'm grateful.
No, certainly not.
But the thing is, I didn't go out and beat on doors and write columns and submit stuff. You do auditions, but by and large, I did an audition in '62 for 2 TV shows in Toronto. I'd been at London for 9 years.
Okay.
And thought, I think it's probably going to be soon. The public is pretty fed up with me here. So I went down to Toronto, auditioned for 2 shows, got them both. Take 30 was one. I was with it for 16 years. Flashback was another 4 years. And on and on and on from there.
Yeah.
Lucky. It wasn't as though I did anything.
Well, you had to have some skill. You had to have some talent.
Gifts. Good luck.
I would venture to say that you were probably fairly professional in the way you conducted
I
yourself.
had a professional trainer, teacher, bunny, frontline announcer. Taught me exactly what it meant to be professional.
Yeah.
Among other things, know your equipment, know the name and serial number of the mics, the cameras, learn the skills of cameramen.
Yeah.
That's respect
Yeah.
of your equipment,
Yeah.
your co-workers, and what they do. That's what being professional is all about. Anyway.
Those are good
Again,
lessons, though.
I was lucky to be there when Bunny turned his light on, and all I had to do was, thank you, more, thank you.
So let's get to the luck that put you in the animation seat.
Bunny again.
So the first gig was the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the perennial Christmas favorite, the Burl Ives, the one that comes on every year and always will.
52 years now.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, I grew up on it. My kids are growing up on it. It's what I pattern some of the stuff I'm trying to do in terms of a Christmas special I'm trying to write. It is one of those hard, it's part of that just group of absolute classics. And you were Hermey the Elf.
The misfit elf who wanted to be a dentist.
Yeah.
And eventually did.
I don't think he got a whole lot of real training.
Let's have a look at your bicuspids there, Mike. They don't look bad. Nice.
I've done all right. I got my first cavities last year, actually.
Well, we've got, I'll make an appointment for you next Tuesday at 4. I want you to come in and we'll have a look.
This right now is the greatest thing in the entire world. Everybody's freaking out in the studio right now. I'm giddy. This is, I got Hermey the Elf.
I only do bicuspids, I don't do molars. They're too big.
Okay, I don't know how to continue.
Yours look very nice.
I actually don't know how to continue right now.
How about 5 o'clock on Thursday? Good.
I don't generally get too phased getting to do this and having love, but this is a really I'm losing my professionalism right now.
Do you think I do this because I know that kind of reflection it gives me a kick to know that. Where at the time nobody knew this was going to last 55 years, 52 years. It's astounding.
Yeah.
Same with Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and even Stan Lee, I believe, as much as he believed in the creation of the character, it didn't expect Spider-Man was going to endure. He was jeered at a lot by, you got a superhero, he's got zits, he can't get along with girls, he's got no big physical physique, and he speaks kind of, gosh, Mr. Jameson, you shouldn't be yelling at me. I'm just a photographer trying to get by. Anyway, what future can a superhero have like that?
But that's because these things were precedent setting at the time.
Maybe, but at the time, if you'd said, you'll be cashing residual checks for the rest of your life, not only was that wrong because there was no such thing as residuals in Canada.
I was going to let you say that, not me.
Yeah. So we never got a nickel. In fact, it was Billie Mae Richards, bless her heart. Billie Mae Richards was a lady in her middle years.
Okay.
Stood well over 4 feet tall, played Rudolph.
Okay, yeah.
Just the most wonderful person. And finally, at one point, said to, I think it was Golden Books or somebody, you guys have the rights to this thing. You're making millions. How about a nickel for the actors? Because we'd never gotten a residual.
Yeah.
She put up the argument for residual, but we got $400. That's it, over 50 years.
It's crazy.
So you don't go in it for the big money.
No.
At least not here.
No, you don't.
At least not then.
Yeah. So I mean, that's so okay. But so when this voice work came to Toronto, came to Canada.
Yes.
Why?
Two NBC producers had the rights to Rudolph.
Yeah.
Wanted to make a TV show.
Yeah.
And they cast around, I guess, including to Orson Welles. Maybe not all of you know who Orson Welles was.
They better. They really better.
Yeah, the big man about many things,
Yeah.
but certainly knew voice and voice acting. He's the man who created Citizen Caine.
And the greatest
Say no more.
prankster of the 20th century.
Well, whatever. Anyway, he knew that there was a pool of English-speaking radio actors in Toronto because of the CBC.
Yeah.
That was our national theater before TV. And that we had both English and North American exposure and sensibility, so we could do English accents, we could do
Right.
American accents.
So versatility up here.
The quality was here, plus the important factor of
I don't want to say it.
you get the job done for $1.55.
Yeah.
So that's how it all started with Rudolph. And then Bunny Cowan, my cousin, supervised the voice tracks. The animation was done in Japan, stop motion animation. By the way, did you know that there's a stage show of Rudolph?
No, I didn't
that tours. They now have 2 or 3 traveling companies at Christmas time.
I didn't know that.
And apparently, and I saw it once, it's remarkably faithful to the stop motion
Really?
puppetry. Yeah. But with live
Yeah. Oh, I had no idea. I had
live
no
people
idea.
in the costumes, and the kids go crazy for it. Played Toronto a couple of years ago at the Princess of Wales, I think.
It would translate really well. I mean, if you
Oh, it was
put
wonderful.
the stage together properly, because
Yeah.
all those things are so tactile and they have such a nice look to them as well.
Well, everything that you're reflecting, the imprint of those shows when you are as young as
Yeah.
you are,
Yeah.
and has endured, is a phenomenon I still
Yeah.
don't understand.
No, there's something to them, and because I mean, I've made a Christmas special. I've seen them come and go over the years. People try to kind of and every once in a while something comes along that kind of does manage to find a foothold in, like the Will Ferrell movie a couple of years ago, Elf, directed by Jon Favreau, who I was talking to you about earlier. That one has kind of entered the lexicon as something
Yeah.
that kids watch at Christmas time.
And how many tries have there been?
Well, that's it.
And so few succeed. I was not of the age to have this make just a big deal to me.
Yeah.
My Christmas story,
Okay.
or childhood
Yeah.
thing, was A Christmas Carol,
Yeah.
the English black and white movie, that every year I'll watch that, but not necessarily Rudolph.
Yeah. Yeah. It is my favorite thing that Dickens ever wrote.
Well, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant piece.
I struggled with some of the other books. It was
Alistair Sim was Scrooge.
yeah.
And I even played Scrooge on stage once.
You did?
Yeah. Back when I started in theater at the London Little Theatre.
Okay.
It was a semi-professional company, had its own Edwardian 1,100 seat theater. It was a wonderful place. And there were 3 levels of theater in Canada. There was amateur church basement,
Yeah.
professional, not very much though. And then there was the London Little Theatre. They were a specially high rated place. In fact, Broadway shows in the 40s and 50s, 60s, when Broadway hits became available for amateur or other professional companies after Broadway.
Yep.
The London Little Theatre always got the first rights to do those shows. So we were constantly in the vanguard.
Huh.
Very
When did Stratford become a thing?
Well, Stratford was 1952, 3.
I'll plead full ignorance in this area. This is
Yeah, well, now you're testing me because I was at Stratford for 4 years, but I remember the impact. But I was in London when it was created. And again, this professorial-looking fellow, Tom Patterson, had the idea, and everybody thought he was nuts. And then he persisted and brought over Tyrone Guthrie, Tanya Mazejevich, who created the theater.
Okay.
And Bob's your uncle. It's history now, and it's nothing better.
Well, yeah, it's part of the wallpaper for me of Canada. Growing up with it, it's always been there.
And as a performer, the excitement you get standing on that stage doing Shakespeare, I'm getting vibes now, I'm sorry. If I break out or break up or break down, or it's because it's a not only talk about a gift, but it's like being in St. Peter's or La Scala. It's sacred. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Indulging.
I know, I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. So you this
We're lucky.
Yeah, you were lucky.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll concede. So that luck carries you forth. Toronto, CBC, all that kind of stuff. This voice work comes along. Can I actually ask you how much you got paid? Do you remember how much you got paid for Rudolph, for Hermey?
I'm not sure I'd be accurate, Mike.
We don't have to adjust for inflation.
No. Oh, I'd be lying if I.
Okay.
But it wasn't much.
Yeah.
Not by today's standards. Anyway.
But being part of, I mean, it was part of the birth of television. Again, part of you're saying this, the luck of the timing of being where you were, and no one knowing that the stuff would live forever the way it has, because there was nothing before that had. I mean, it's one of those ground floor things that it clearly filled a hunger in the kids of North America, to the point that, like, I was watching it on, Kraft sponsored Christmas specials in the 70s with all these horrible looking foods in the commercials that are all bad cheese products. And to this day, I like watching it with my own kids now. It's all there, and that's your voice. That's part of that all the time. I mean, I come at this in terms of wanting to be part of animation and television and those kinds of things from a very kind of aw shucks place. A couple years ago, I went to 30 Rockefeller Plaza, did the NBC tour, the studio tour, and they show a little movie at the beginning of the tour. And it talks about how NBC started out and started with radio stations and all that kind of thing. And legitimately, I tear up. I tear up at that kind of thing.
I understand that, and so you should.
Because there's a thing that we get to be a part of, and it affects so many people. And I hear it when I talk to people who were part of the beginnings of Sesame Street, because they really did it for a reason. They got into TV, kids TV, because there was a reason there, a calling there, and they were trying to help people legitimately. But beyond that, even just the notion that people are prepared to make room for you in their home for 30 minutes a week, whatever it might be, or 30 minutes a year, even if it's for one of those things, that you've done something that people have in their lives.
And it's worth gunning for. Look, I accept everything you're saying, and I've never lost my gratitude for having been able to be there. I mean, if I had started out and my parents had sensed I had any musical ability, let's say, to play a violin or a clarinet or trumpet, I used to think I could play trumpet or wanted to do it one time, and then get to be a member of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic, whatever, the Berlin Philharmonic. I mean, talk about, I don't know if my heart would have stood that kind of excitement of being part of that legacy. Yeah. And then, let alone Mozart, you get to play Mozart. You know? Wow.
And there are only X number of people who are the Mozarts of the world.
That's right.
But the idea that you get to be part of that in some context, and for most of us in animation, like our credits roll by really quickly at the end, all that kind of thing. But it's still, I don't know, there's again, this is where I said I come from a very aw shucks place, but to me there's a magic to all that. There really is. And whether that's luck and timing and those things.
I hope you've also thought about the fact that, and I don't mean to be overdoing it. In fact, I didn't really think about it much until just now.
Okay.
What you're talking about, what we're talking about, this need to be creative in these venues, these disciplines, is spanning, I don't know how long you think the human beings have been around, but let's say it's 20,000 years. Yeah. That's been universal for all that time. Yeah. And that is a touchstone with our origins. If only we pay more attention to that rather than techniques to kill each other, which is also going back 20,000 years.
These seem to be all part of our nature.
Why? So you gotta shake your fist and say, what did you have in mind? Are you creating us that don't understand that? We're not very smart. Thanks. Anyway.
But you've gotten to be part of that creative legacy that we are.
Again, by good luck, and I'm very grateful. You bet.
No, it sounds like it. I mean, I feel the same way about what I do. It's I was out of the industry for a couple of years, and I fought really hard. I can't do anything else. You know, I tried other things. I worked for the federal government for a little while, and I fought really hard to get back in because it's what I do. It's what I can't not work in
exactly.
this field.
Well, and then celebrate that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a force. Huh?
Yeah, I'm one of the most grateful people
exactly.
I know.
No, good. We understand each other.
Okay, so
let's have lunch. No, I'm sorry, I'm kidding.
So let me just, so you've got the group you were working with, the voice actors. Were you guys a group that kind of worked together on other things, or was it just that
no?
We all
had day jobs, often or most of the time in broadcasting.
Yeah.
Give you an example. There was a fellow named Alexander Scorby in the United States.
Okay.
Had a magnificent voice, better than Lorne Green's even.
That's saying a lot.
To take nothing away from Lorne Green, he was the penultimate voice of authority, elegance, substance, aristocracy, and did most of the major commercials in the United States.
Got a lot of tea commercials?
Oh. In Canada, we had our own version, and that was Henry Raymer from Montreal. Great portly fellow with a magnificent voice. I hated him. I envied him so much. Henry, talk about a professional. I'll give you a quick story. Henry, according to union regulations, you go in for do a recording, whether it's theater, drama, I mean, you know, in the broadcasting business, commercials, radio, TV, whatever. As a union member, you're supposed to be there 10 minutes before the gig starts.
Okay.
That's your professionalism. Henry would be booked for 3 out of every 5 radio and TV voiceovers in the country.
Yeah.
Top dollar. He was brilliant at it. Henry would arrive at the studio session exactly 10 minutes late.
Okay.
An absolute violation of everything professional. And he got away with it because
He was that good.
he was that good, and he never ran the session over. He would give it to you in the first or second take.
Right.
Just a brilliant natural. Henry was part of this group.
Okay.
Max Ferguson, who I haven't got the time to tell you the legacy of Max as a Canadian radio icon. Probably pioneered ad lib or improv in Canada, and nobody knew about it because he was doing it in the 40s from Halifax, and he had the name Rawhide. And he would take 3 stories from the morning newspaper and create little 5-10 minute dramas.
He just riff.
One of them was a story about ballet, I think, or the government. And he created in no time a little episode, which we later recorded. You can get it somewhere. The subject was Le Collège des Hommes de Garbage.
All right.
Literally a university for teaching garbage men how to make their moves on and off the truck with the tins in ballet-like form. You would fall down laughing. That was Max. He was part of the group. Len Berman, one of the other people like Henry, who came from Montreal in the late 60s. They called him the Montreal Mafia. And he was part of it. So these people all had either regular commercial day jobs, or were all stage actors,
working actors
at one
on
time or
stage,
another in whatever media. So doing these cartoons was a kind of bonus. It was, Tuesday at 5, I can do that. And you get an extra $50 or $100 or whatever it was. But it wasn't your day job.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Next
Well, there wasn't
question.
a whole ton of it, right? So
That's right.
When they come together for the Rudolph one, you guys, it's a one-off gig.
That's right. But all I'm trying to sort of get to, if I may, presumptuously, I'm sure you'll say, incorrectly, why did Bunny hire us and create this little core of, and what you had to be part of this little coterie. Never numbered more than maybe 6 or 7 people. Part of it was of obviously the ability to do the job, but the ability to do the job
quickly and efficiently.
Quickly, exactly. And that's a premium.
Yeah.
I mean, you better be able to do that, or else Clint Eastwood will never hire you.
Well, he only does one take. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, talk about gifts and being able to do these things. You don't do a lot of studying for that. You either can or you can't, and that was one of the criteria. If you're asking the question, how do we get to be part of this little company, acting company? That's one of the qualities you needed.
So coming into the studio for something like this, I'm curious about the actual the process at the time in terms of it's a production being done very similarly to today.
Okay.
You know, you've got basically a client in the States who's doing a piece of the production here, and a piece of it elsewhere. Who was doing the voice direction? Bunny was doing the voice direction.
Most of the time he did those for the major ones. In terms of Spider-Man, for example, again, you're correct in saying tracks were done here, animation there, music there. Somebody had to coordinate it, and sometimes it was somebody in New York. There was a wonderful man by the name of Seamus Culhane. Yeah. Rough-hewn.
Fella from New York with an accent like that, we would always leave a little message at the end of the notes for the recording session. For Christ's sake, souls, why do you do this? Why don't you do that?
All amusing. Was a giant in animation in Hollywood before he got into the cartoon business.
Yeah, I think most of us all have a book on our shelves at home somewhere that's a Seamus Culhane book.
Great, glad to hear that.
And the guy was involved in the Fleischer Studios
right.
back in the beginning, worked for Disney, it was part of everything.
And dressed beautifully.
This is what I've heard. Yeah. I've heard he was a bit of I don't know if dandy's the word for it, but
no,
it was more...
just let's call it the man had style.
He had style, okay. But that's amazing that you've had that, like you have that brush with someone like Seamus Culhane, who is part of our, I don't know, I mean, he's part of the animation side. That's a huge figure for us. And it's you.
But look at how every
this.
One of these disciplines, Lovetails gets one leads to another, is tangential with another. You're all part of the same force that makes you a fan.
Yeah.
Ultimately, or initially.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's most of us do come to it with something like that, a similar story. You like the stuff you're watching when you grow up. You want to be a part of it, and you.
But that's the point. That makes you feel, even if you've not had. Sorry, I'm twisting and turning here. My girdle, you know. That you belong, not only to something bigger than you and something older than you, but that something is enduring beyond you. Yeah. It's kind of your immortality.
Yeah.
Not that you do it for that reason, but the fact that that is a possibility makes you feel it's worthwhile. And might have even convinced my father, who said, get a real job, that it was worthwhile eventually.
Right, right. So I guess, so how long, sorry if I'm going to ask, how long was your father around? When did you, how long did you live?
In mid-80s, yeah.
Yeah, so he would have seen that the Rudolph thing was around for a while. It didn't just go away.
Yeah, it wasn't the Rudolph so much as broadcasting itself. In fact, as I said, when I was in London, and this is up until 62, I would be doing at least a play a year at the London Little Theatre. And my dad, being a traveler, he would come to London with his wares once in a while, twice a year possibly. And he was free one day when I was doing a production of Waiting for Godot. Okay. Pretty bizarre out there piece, and ours was a pretty bizarre production of it. There isn't, I don't suppose, a standard normal production of it anywhere has ever been. Anyway, he was persuaded to come to a performance on a matinee. And after that, it was never, why don't you get a real job?
Really?
To it was never demonstrative or anything about it, but I think he could see that I had some abilities there and that it wasn't that much of a waste of time.
Right.
And that was an enormous psychological relief to know that he didn't write you off as being Even though he would probably have been happier if I'd been a lawyer, and I'd be richer today if I had been. But
it's not why we do these things, right?
that's right.
It would be nice.
Exactly. I remember I was at CKEY, Toronto radio station, back in the day in 1950. And I was a man from the recording studios, RCA, would travel promoting new artists' records.
Okay.
And he came along and he promoted a guy by the name of Ralph Flanagan, band leader.
Okay.
This was in the 1950. And Ralph came around for an interview. Ralph, who are the musicians you think are great? And he said, oh, there's no question. Horace Heidt, Heidt. Mm-hmm. A schlocky kind of band.
Okay, yeah.
And Ralph had a really good band, I thought. But his hero was Horace Heidt. Why, Ralph? Because Horace owns apartment buildings.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to touch that.
Well, but
it's true. It's true. Like
that's a true story.
We were just kidding. We had a group in here a little while ago of people who own little studios. We were talking about that, and we kid amongst ourselves that like if any of us had any kind of business sense, you get your studio up and running and you buy your building. You invest in the real estate. That's the longevity of it all. So you can support your habit of making cartoons. Find some business plan that actually turns into those other kinds of assets. That's a very that's a very apt anecdote as far as I'm concerned. We're going to dwell on some of the cartoon stuff as well. We're going to get to that the Spider-Man bit, because what's interesting about Spider-Man is that it's part of. We now have an industry, like I've talked about, that is very part of this factory system where we've got clients in the States. We do some of the work here, some of the work gets done overseas, and it's interesting to see where the groundwork got laid for that over the course of our history in animation. And originally, so we had a fella, some of the background on the Spider-Man stuff, and more really the Rocket Robin Hood stuff, because that's the one that was actually produced here. A fellow by the name of Al Guest, and this is probably for the purposes of you guys at home. A fellow by the name of Al Guest, he was an animation cameraman and editor from Winnipeg. And he came to Toronto in 1957. He founded a company called Spectrum Productions, and they did commercial spots. And somewhere along the way, as time went on, 1964, it became Al Guest Animation. I've read that they actually had a pet alligator in the place, named Peaches. I don't know much about that. But in 1967, they were working on University Avenue. They had 3 floors on University Avenue, and 2 floors were the production offices for the Rocket Robin Hood show.
Really?
And the Rocket Robin Hood show, that was apparently it was 52 half hours initially, and that was Steve Krantz Productions in the States. And those were the guys who were doing Spider-Man.
And it was Len Berman, I think, who did Rocket Robin Hood.
That's possible, yeah.
Birman.
So this is where this initial thing, because they even talk about it in the reading that I've done about, it was almost kind of faked as a Canadian production. It got a sale to the CBC, but it really was sort of an American production, more of a service gig, which is what we largely do today. And there's a whole story about how that show didn't end all that well, and they sent Ralph Bakshi up, who's another pillar of our.
That's right.
He actually had a warrant put out on him here in Canada at the end of that production, because they actually grabbed all this. He grabbed, like, it was the financing was falling apart up here, as the story goes. And he grabbed a whole bunch of the storyboards and a lot of the production art and everything, and he just jumped in a cab and went to Buffalo and just took it with him. And they finished it down at Krantz Studios, and that's why there's an episode where they're actually backgrounds from Spider-Man are being used in the Rocket Robin Hood episode.
Gotcha.
So it all kind of overlaps, and we've touched on it in a couple of other podcasts, but that's kind of where that was happening. And it is now the cowboy side of it, I don't know. I know Ralph has been back to Canada since then, so the warrant has either expired or something along those lines. But it was in that context that we had this studio in Canada in Toronto that was doing the service work on Rocket Robin Hood. You did a smaller part on Rocket Robin Hood, I believe.
Well, we all did.
Yeah, it was the same group of voice actors.
Who
right?
wasn't doing the lead? We would do the bank managers or the professor or the detective or something.
Yeah.
Even Bunny is in almost all of these tracks as one of those kinds of characters.
Probably half of them even uncredited.
And he was even in Rudolph. He was one of the reindeer's fathers.
Okay. Really? I have to find out which one.
Geez, I should tell you.
But with Spider-Man, you landed kind of the plum role.
Yes.
You got to be Spider-Man.
Well, that was Bunny.
And that would have had to have been
a
pretty. That was, I mean, as far as animation gigs go, that was a pretty big order. That would have lasted a little while as far as an animation gig.
Sure, I remember we would do sessions every 3 months or so.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the time of the year, but it would have had to been sometime when I wasn't doing this day job at Take 30 at the CBC. That was in the 60s, right? I can even remember when you talk about Bakshi and Guest and Krantz, immediately flashed to a guy, I'm trying to remember his name, Harold. Was the engineer at Eastern Sound, which was the sound studio, the recording studio, when we did all those.
Yeah. Where was this? Where was it?
That was 2 or 3 blocks north of Bloor on the east side of Avenue Road, or Bay Street.
Really?
Before the curve at the
Yeah.
Jesse Ketchum School.
Really?
There. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. It's amazing. Like it's like, you grow up watching all this stuff and not knowing that it. I mean, I was in Ottawa. I wasn't in Toronto, but I mean, this stuff was just happening here. And I mean, I'm born in '73, so I'm a couple years behind it. Sure. I know.
Baby.
I know. Well, not in this room. But it is. It's amazing when you come into it, because I didn't even know that any of that stuff had been even touched here in Canada. And you start to learn about your craft, and you start to learn about the history of it, and that the things from your childhood happen down the street.
That's right.
It's fantastic.
And I go by some of these places, like the RCA studios in those days was on Mutual Street, just below Carlton, around the corner from the CBC. Big studio. They did first run musicians there, some radio drama, not very much. A lot of music, a lot of folk singers, people who were names. Yep. RCA was the big studio, and that's where we did Rudolph. And Billy May and I went to New York. Were sent to New York to record the voice, the singing tracks for "We're a Couple of Misfits" and "Fame and Fortune." And here's Billy May, stands this high. They had 2 apple boxes there to make her high. To be at these mics. Well, I mean, talk about excitement. To me, the idea that we were there recording, even though they were recorded tracks of the music, we get to sing with, nobody's going to know what this means, but to me it did, musicians at Local 802. That's the New York AF of M local of Musicians Union. These are the big players of the world.
Right.
Wow, now talk about exciting.
So it never occurred to you to go and ply your trade south of the border?
I did once.
What was that? When did you go?
Turned out to be during a recession in the 90s.
Ah, okay.
I went to New York. I won an audition for a show that if it had gone and I had been there, you and I would never have met. Time magazine had an idea, and an editor named, I can see him, originally from Louisiana, believe it or not. And it was going to be a program like As It Happens. Do you know As It Happens?
Of course, yeah.
Creation of Mark Starowitz at the CBC. I think ideally as great a radio program has ever been devised. And they were going to take the week's news Sunday night, phone out to the makers of this news all over the world, a 1-hour show prior to the release of that week's Time magazine issue.
Okay.
And I was going to be the announcer.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Never happened because of the recession.
So, but it is something. So we see it. I mean, you see it across the board. A lot of Canadian actors go down to the States. They make it big there. We have our own version of it in animation. It's partly why we're doing the Startoon thing. Is that a lot of our key kind of visionary talent. There's a bit of a brain drain to places like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, where these guys go down there because we have a very risk-averse culture here, and so to have the breakout hits that you see in animation. We make a lot of animation in Canada, but we don't have those kinds of breakout hits. They happen in the States, where people risk more money because they make more money off of it, and that's part of what Startoon's mandate is: try to find a way to keep these guys here. But it is something very similar. It's both, across the board. It's more obvious and more visual, more. Well, it's more obvious in acting because you get these giant movie stars, the Jim Carreys of the world, that kind of thing, who head down there, the Ryan Goslings, these guys who become these big stars.
You say.
Well, they are.
Not to me, they're not. Well, it's not that I have anything against them. I've never met them, but
Yeah.
I don't move in those circles, and different generations.
Yeah, sure. But were there apart from that time in the 90s, were there, because even earlier on, people were always heading down to California.
Oh, please, yes.
You must have had that desire at some
I did,
time.
and I acted on it for a year.
Yeah?
I even went to L.A.
When you were younger?
No, this is in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay.
I had done a play here called I'm Not Rappaport, and I loved it. The only play I ever really went after
Yeah.
and got it.
Yeah.
More good luck again. But there's a reason I bring this up. Yeah, the success of that play, and the author, Herb Gardner,
Okay.
wrote me a letter of recommendation which got me an H1, a green card.
Yeah.
And but it was in the recession of the early 90s,
Yeah.
so I was at auditions in California and New York with guys who had their name on television shows, and here they were auditioning for minor parts or less than lead parts in other shows. So I didn't have much good luck there, but I'm glad I went anyway.
Because it's part of our kind of I don't know, we struggle in Canada to celebrate perhaps some of our own achievements and we're not a big propaganda place. And so it takes sometimes that going elsewhere and being a success elsewhere before we start to recognize it ourselves.
Well, look, I've done some things since then. Once on a show called Less Than Kind, I ended up getting killed off. And the crew put up a little memo on the board and said, "Don't kill off Rosen." That was the nicest compliment you could possibly have. And it was because they knew me of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I might show up on a set and people come over and say, "Hey, did you do that voice?" I mean, talk about luck.
Do you, over the course of your career, so I mean, the Spider-Man thing has kind of followed you around a little bit? You're saying something like that?
Yeah, and I'm, and I don't misunderstand me, please. Burl Ives, who did...
he was the snowman, he was the narrator, he was,
and the only guy who got a residual from Rudolph.
Of course.
Because he demanded one. Was asked, about his career, and he said, "All the things I've done on film and stage, and I'll always be remembered as Sam the Snowman on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer." Now, I've not done all that much noteworthy work, but I've done some theater work I've been very proud of. But on my gravestone, it'll be, he was the voice of Spider-Man. Well, fine. I can live with that, but it's a matter of perspective, and nobody will ever be able to take away from me the joy of having done those other roles, which is, I'm sort of saying this directly to your present and prospective animators, your feet are in the same ocean. You are sharing that wetness, that excitement, that natural high from the medium you're working in, and the fact that you're sharing this with some pretty good people who've gone before you. So it's been worth it.
We do struggle to understand our
Everybody
context.
does that. Yeah, you don't have to do that as doctors, but you do sometimes in other fields.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of sort of this industry-wide inferiority complex to a certain degree, I think. We talk about our sort of our cousins in the comic book industry, and those people, they get their name on the front page of it, and they go to these conventions where they are more closely linked to the work that they.
I've been to a couple of comic cons.
I was going to ask if you've done the cons.
I've only done two.
Yeah, here in Toronto.
No, not big enough for that.
Oh, come on.
No.
Fan Expo wouldn't have you?
No.
That's the big one.
Well,
here.
nobody ever mentioned. I've done one in Windsor, one in Detroit. Supposedly going to be doing one in Boston in the fall. I don't know if it'll happen or not. Or Pittsburgh. But It's come late to that, but it's fascinating.
Well, that's a whole new thing that's kind of opened up now.
Fascinating.
Yeah, the con world is a place where people who have these certain iconic roles can continue to make a living out of it. Yeah. I think the guys who do, the current Green Arrow television show that's done out in Vancouver, a guy named Stephen Amell, and he's built a sort of side industry helping to represent actors.
Yes.
And in the con circuit.
Right.
It really is its own thing now, and it's not the kind of thing. I mean, in the olden days when it was just, it used to be just the Star Trek conventions in the 70s.
Oh, really? Yes.
In the 80s, and it was kind of it was sort of, if you were out of work, you could go and do the cons.
Right.
But now it's part and parcel. There's a whole other revenue stream coming from that.
That's right.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of that. We have animation festivals, we have things like that, but we don't have the same kind of animation festivals that we go to. We don't really have the same kind of con culture, but we cross over a lot. We're all fans of the same kind of stuff, and we go to those things. No, I think you'd be a natural for that kind of stuff. I would have assumed that you're Spider-Man, man.
Hey.
It's what it comes down to. I guess there was a Spider-Man. There was a Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends show that was part of my childhood as well. That was on in the 80s. And that guy, I don't remember the actor, but he had a very distinctive voice as well, and it was very different from yours. And even the Peter Parker was a very different Peter Parker. He was a little more robust and not quite the same kind of. He'd evolved a little bit over the years. Let me ask you: do you have a sense of? I've heard you say that it was a job. It was a job, and you brought professionalism to it, and you went in, you did the job. Do you have a connection to that beyond? It's a job that follows you through life, but do you have any kind of proprietary feeling over that character? Do you feel like it's yours?
No, but I take your point, because I guess I never thought I had done all that great a job. Because I didn't picture myself as a superhero. My God, you can see I'm not very muscular and heroic looking or sounding. I only did what I thought. Remember, I was only 35 at the time. Okay. Not very old or experienced. But I had a point. Proprietary. I never, really thought, boy, that's me. I own that now. And people will always be looking at big deal. No, I have done work in theater and on TV where I had become extremely proprietary.
Yeah, you feel ownership over that character?
Harold Arlen. I did a not that successful TV show produced by the three guys who produced the Red Violin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Anyway, Larry Weinstein was the director, and I played Harold Arlen. Apparently, I looked a little bit like him. Okay. And this is a man who wrote about 4,000 popular songs, of which one is the most popular song ever written.
Happy Birthday?
No, good point. Guess.
I don't know.
Well, just for fun.
Oh, God. Sheila would be better at this than I would be. Most popular pop song of all time? Throw a guess at it at the wall?
Oh gosh, it'll probably be something. Michael Jackson, maybe. Yeah, or I would go earlier and say.
What?
It's got to be an earlier, a 60s track, I would think, right?
No, earlier.
No? Earlier 50s?
Earlier, I would think it's probably going to be like Bing Crosby.
30s.
30s?
Late 30s.
Okay, you're going to have to bail us out on this one.
Pardon?
Hound Dog?
No, that's the 30s. This is even before Hound Dog, pre-Hound Dog. No, we're talking like big band era pops, when pop stuff wasn't considered what we would consider pop today.
Mostly,
just put us out of our misery, man.
Broadway and film music.
Yeah, put us out of our misery.
Well, the song?
What is it? Yeah.
Over the Rainbow.
Oh,
really?
There you go. Okay.
It was written for Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz.
So you played the
39.
You played the guy who wrote it.
I played Harold Arlen, who wrote it.
Wow. And that's the one you feel.
Well, anytime I hear of Harold Arlen, I say I was Harold Arlen. Yeah. Very proprietary.
Yeah. What was it about that created that for? What was it about that role?
One of those things, again, you grow up with, and your own musical tastes lead you to certain artists and certain forms. Yeah. Jazz has always been a big deal for me, modern jazz, and great Broadway songs. I've never been a fan of Broadway musicals. Okay. Was in one once, but never, as a form. But the songs, yes.
Yeah.
So-called standards, of which
Yep.
Over the Rainbow is perhaps as great a one as ever was. You know the name Cole Porter, etc. Anyway, that music was my music, and that's why I was thrilled to be involved with that and proprietary about it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We raised my youngest on Singing in the Rain.
Well, there you
That's
are.
her. That's we got certain movies that we watch, but Singing in the Rain was always one of the main ones for her. And then every time it rains outside, she's got her umbrella and she's out singing along.
Sure.
She's 3 years old and she's out. It's part of
those things are part of the fabric of our trade, our culture.
Yeah, that's the wallpaper. That's what we grew up with. And every once in a while, something comes along that adds. This is what we're talking about. Something comes along that adds to it, and you got to be part of a few things that added to it.
I'm very, very grateful.
On the nerd stuff, the Spider-Man stuff, are you aware? Have you the other versions of it that have hit the popular culture? Have you seen any of those movies over the last 10 years? Have you?
There was about 5, 8. Well, I don't know. When did the first Spider-Man movie get made?
The big one was back in the 2000s. That was the one, the Sam Raimi one, Tobey Maguire.
That's right.
Yeah.
After the one, either that or the one afterward, my agent had done a little bit of work to say, the guy who did the original cartoons is still alive, and he's here. And they kind of weren't very interested. Even though Sam had, as you're aware, had a big connection with Algonquin Park. He and what's the other guy? The other two who created Roots. They were part of. We all went to the same camp. Yeah. In Algonquin Park.
Yeah. Okay.
Where I have a cottage, or we have our family has had a cottage, but they never took anything up that involved me.
That's the kind
although I'd hoped that there might have been.
What's the kind of little cameo, the nod that you're looking for? That is always a nice thing for the fans.
Well, yeah.
Did you see any of the movies?
I saw that one with Toby. I don't think I've been a big moviegoer. Period. So.
I'm just curious if it's one of those things where because you were Spider-Man at a time, is something you look for.
But again, Mike, and I have to please don't misunderstand.
No, it's okay.
But I'm not trying to be. No more applause. But your question was.
I guess it dovetails into I didn't feel
that I was worthy of being that. I might have acted differently if I had, or maybe if I'd just been an American and said, you know what I did, and you know who I am, and it might have, in the current presidential situation, that's maybe all you need in the U.S. Blow your own horn, and that's
I'm not touching politics.
Well, I'm not either, except to say that's one style of a character in showbiz, which is everybody acknowledges is really what he is. He's a showman. He's sure not a politician, or maybe even a businessman. Who knows? Show us your tax return. Anyway, look. There's more to laugh about that now than worry about being serious.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to touch the politics on this.
Wait, look.
Because honestly, if you got me going, I wouldn't stop. And
I understand.
This has become a very different kind of a podcast.
I understand perfectly. I have a cousin. I have 2 cousins live in the U.S. One of them was active in politics and the unions in the U.S. And he was the press representative for a lady congressman. Senator from Hawaii.
Okay.
Back in the 50s and 60s, the 40s and 50s and 60s. Alan, my cousin Alan, bless his heart. Ever since this political phenomenon happened in the last year in the U.S., we haven't spoken.
Oh, really?
Not that we've made a pact that we will not speak, but I figure if I ever called him, we'd get into such a terrible. Yeah. I don't know what kind of an argument, but it's embarrassing. And I feel embarrassed for him, and I am aware, as we all in the world are aware, There's a lot riding on this. So we might as well be involved and interested. And it's not a matter of taking sides, right? It's a matter of our fate.
Yeah,
It's very important.
The impact is very clear, and it's. I mean, the day that election happened, for me, it was hope took a real hit.
Exactly.
And it did. It got me. I mean, I grew up very. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have grown up a white guy in Ottawa, Canada.
Absolutely.
Where it always seemed like everything's always getting better.
Absolutely.
And we as a family have tried to. It seems like it's not just enough just to recycle and vote well anymore. Like it's important to get involved in things, and we as a family are getting involved in a few things and trying to actually tangibly contribute to things being better in the world.
And it's not going to be easy because that diversity is increasing. And look, what is the biggest growth medium in our business? Political satire, commentary, podcasts, the internet. It's a whole other world. And often people of not very great abilities or intellect are out there commanding attention and audiences, and the fervor and fever of political discussion is germane to breathing anymore. It's a whole new world. So we can't sit on the bylines, or else we're going to go under.
Well, and this comes back to this is what I mean very seriously about working in kids media. We're making cartoons and we're working in kids media.
Yeah.
And we are talking directly to those children who will be voters someday and will be. I mean, like I drive through this city and I can't help it. I get angry or grumbly about the selfishness often of the individuals on the street, whether it's in other drivers, that kind of thing. And it's those simple things. And here I am. I'm getting into that age now where it's like I'm complaining about the old days, and it just the simple fact of just saying,
all you're doing is developing a sense of community, and that's what we all need to do, or else we are going to perish.
But that's where we are in a position to help reinforce some of those things, because we're in a position where we're putting messages out into the world, and we're part of kids. Kids programming is huge that way. And yes, we've lived through all kinds of eras of we grew up in a time when cartoons were basically just glorified toy commercials.
That's right.
And there's different levels of it. I mean, preschool stuff tends to be more educational, and there's a little bit more a moral lesson that has to be given in that. Whereas other stuff, but I have a hard time working on anything that I don't feel isn't contributing to something. I'm looking for work that is substantial.
Good. That's fine. And whatever you get, you'll work some of that in. May I do a name drop?
By all means.
I got cast in a film that was being shot in Montreal, turn of the century. Hard to hear yourself say that. In 2000, exactly. And I'm a caretaker in a big Montreal customs warehouse, a working man. So they fly me up to Montreal and they take me immediately from the airport to wardrobe. Put kind of dirty stuff on my face and a pair of kind of dirty coveralls, and take me out to the director to get vetted for this look. So I'm standing there and they're shooting an outdoor scene with Robert De Niro outside this warehouse. And there's the director, and here I'm standing distance from here to the camera. And standing there, watching what's going on. And third AD, for those of you, I'm sure you know what a third AD is on the film. Nice young lady comes over and says, "Excuse me, sir, but you'll have to move. This is a movie set, and we don't encourage the public because," which was terrific because I convinced them I was a working guy. The only reason I bring up this story is the director was a guy I would walk over broken glass to work with again.
What was the movie? I don't know.
Frank Oz.
No way, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There is a guy every actor should get a chance to work with. Talk about thoughtful, supportive, creative, confidence building. Just delightful. And there is the man started with children's television.
Yeah.
And apparently every crew he worked with, and every day, people would come over and say, "Frank, do this, Pete. Because Frank and Jim Henson could do and did all of the other voices.
Yeah. There were only a handful of them doing all those voices.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so he could do them, and people, just as you giving me the compliment of smiling when I do that voice, as aged and pathetic as it is now, that same element existed with Frank and his crew.
Yeah, every once in
and
a while
I
you
understand it, absolutely. And therefore appreciate it even more.
I've been fortunate enough to meet a couple of Muppets over
Yes?
the years. Yeah, I met Carol Spinney.
Yes.
And he had Oscar the Grouch with him.
Well,
And before that, a couple lesser known ones. But it is amazing that the first time I met one was at an animation festival in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
And it was one of the Muppets from the Latin American Plaza Sésamo. So it was one that I actually hadn't met before. And the puppeteer just whipped him out in the middle of the Hilton lobby. And it's fascinating to see what happens to people. Like as soon as this thing comes out, this guy's not even there anymore.
no.
And everybody from all over the lobby, everybody comes around and they all want to, even if they know it or don't, it still looks like a Muppet. You know that it's one of those because they have that look about them. And everybody just goes right for those eyes. This guy's wonderful, but he's not even there. The Muppet thing is magical. Carol Spinney was here through town for TIFF Kids. At TIFF they do this kids festival and they do a professional development kind of a week as well, and usually somebody from the Muppet Gang or from Sesame Street. Maria, who was on Sesame Street, was here the year before that. So that's always a big, but that's that kind of thing. These are people who have done something substantial and
I'm trying to honor that and tell you exactly. I appreciate my experience in a similar way to that, and I'm very grateful, truly.
Yeah, when you get to do something that does have that kind of impact. So I heard you talk about playing the role of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and you touched on it earlier about how you didn't think you were very superheroic. And
No, I was really a real Peter Parker.
and doing that. Well, that's what I heard you on one of the other podcasts, and that's what they didn't jump on, was that that's why I think you were so perfectly cast in that role, because the heroic voice of Spider-Man was a put-on. Was a put-on for Peter Parker.
That's right. He's assuming an identity. Yeah.
So, and that's where, because you were saying that in
I
terms
never thought of it that way before. That's interesting.
It's what makes that role well cast, in that you felt natural in the Peter Parker role. You felt like that was something that you could squeak a little bit for it, and it came fairly naturally to you to play that. And then when you had to put on the superheroic voice, that was more of a forced.
That makes so much sense. Where was my brain? Why couldn't I figure that out?
Because that's
beautiful. No, but that's a perfect explanation.
Well, you can use that next time if someone asks you.
Gosh. Now I'm going to be Mr. Superhero. Lead me to a villain. Come on, who is game here to go up against me? Are you kidding? No, that's wrong.
But I remember as a kid because you'd hear the Peter Parker voice and you could tell it was the same person.
Could you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you could tell it was the same person. But there was that shift in personality.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there was that shift, but it did feel like he was puffing up his chest a little bit, and he was assuming his superheroic persona.
Well, yes, and he had. And that's the only other area or approach I could have had was what motivated him to do and be what he eventually did. Well, it was his family. He had lost his relative. He was worried for Aunt May. And he wasn't a big kind of studly high school football champion or anything. So he had to do something to create the character that took over, that was saintly, that was righteous, doing important and good things for the world. But that explains it. Gee, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Very much. Where were you 30 years ago?
If I honestly tell you, no.
No, but apropos of that, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be falsely modest, but Henry Raymer, this announcer man that I talked to, he was also a very good actor. He was in Duddy Kravitz, the original Montreal, in which Richard Dreyfuss had his beginning. He had a natural, because of this stentorian, majestic voice of his. He didn't have to do anything to be a superhero.
Right.
He just was in that great voice. And, I obviously didn't think I
But that's
could
not who
approach
Spider-Man
that.
is.
But you're right. That's uniquely that role, yeah.
There, score one for the nerd over here.
Boy,
All right.
boy, will you sign my ID here?
Along the way, because like I said, I mean, like when you cracked into the voice earlier, I'm getting a thrill having you here and doing this. Over the course of your career, you must have had opportunities to have similar experiences yourself when you meet those people that you admire and you work with those people you admire.
Oh, yes, no question. I mean, I did about 4,000 interviews on Take 30 over the years. I did 16 years, plus 9 years in London. And,
what are the ones that really got you? What are the ones that stayed with you?
Oh, there were several, but I talk about the quality of the people I got to meet long before I had an understanding to truly appreciate them. Do you know the name Sir Robert Watson Watt?
Robert Watson Watt. I'm going to plead ignorance on that.
Little
one.
fellow, sort of Scottish and English, but off my head.
Okay.
This is the man who invented radar.
Oh, really?
And he came along in the 50s, early days of television, came on this little station in Ontario. He was appearing for some scientific reason or whatever, and he got to actually shake hands with a man who...
Yeah.
Anyway, some of the performers I met who were wonderful to meet, well, the best of them I've always said, if you want to know a celebrity that I've interviewed that I thought was number one, Michael Caine.
Really?
Yeah. He not only was he engaging and pleasant, good stories, and he came to play. Everybody knows that phrase now. And that apparently is one of the reasons for success or failure of guests on late night shows and so forth. They come ready to deliver, play, give you stuff, not just have stuff fished out of them.
Yeah.
He came to play. Michael Caine did that. It was wonderful. And his own story, culturally, was absolutely gripping. I mean, he came from a working class family. He could have been a fishmonger or a barrel boy till he died and never have anything. But he's the guy who broke down the barrel with fine English accent.
Well, I was going to say the same
as
thing.
opposed to the working man.
Yeah,
At
he
a
popularized
time
that.
in English theater history when that was vital. And all the so-called kitchen sink actors in Britain, Albert Finney and others were the same, and credited Caine in the film Alfie with breaking that barrier.
Yeah. It's interesting. So we had him a couple of years ago, one of the studios here in town. He did some voice work in, I'm going to maybe get it wrong, maybe it was in Romeo and Juliet or one of these other features that were happening through town. And he was in town for the Toronto International Film Festival, Michael Caine.
Yeah.
And he just showed up at the studio one day. He heard that that's where they were making the movie, and he just popped by. No announcement, no nothing. He just showed up, and like everybody in the place. He walked, and apparently he took like a real interest in all the various aspects of what the job was.
Oh, he would.
And he was wonderful. And everybody got that moment of getting to meet this guy because he just they spent an afternoon seeing what was happening with that thing that he'd done the voice work for a year and a half previous, because he just heard that it was happening down the street. It
doesn't surprise.
He's one of those.
Really glad to
that's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Anybody else? Any standouts? Any giants? Come on.
Well, who's bigger? I interviewed John. Oh no, I'm ashamed. Iconic director. Had a brother who was in Sierra Madre. Oh, help me here.
John Huston?
Houston.
Really?
Yeah, in Ireland, we were sent on these film junkets back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. The film studio would be shooting a movie in Italy or Egypt or wherever, and they'd put together a plane load of 20 people, because they apparently, if you get 20 seats, you get one free. And anyway, would send us on these junkets where they were making films, and I was on 2 or 3 of those tours, and one of them was Heston was shooting in England. It was a historical literary figure.
Okay.
Back in the 1700s or something like that.
Yeah, so some kind of period piece.
Yeah, and just being and listening to this rumbling voice come out was astonishing and wonderful. That was just a note of appreciation more than anything. I interviewed Charlton Heston once on the boat that was in Khartoum. I don't know if you know the movie. He played General Charles Gordon, the savior or attempted savior of the Egyptian Nile town of Khartoum, and he was killed. One of the British heroes. And Heston revealed how, because he had been playing and has almost always played these larger than life heroic historical figures.
He's one of those tooth gnashing kind of actors.
And I think, meaning no harm, he was very kind to me, and he was quite a good artist, a line drawing artist. Very good. And I have at home a
Heston?
A sketch that he did of one of the extras on the set in this 19th century British Army garb. But why did I bring that up? Maybe that's... Yeah, I was only going to say, I think, meaning no irreverence, that he became convinced that he was as heroic as any of these heroes he portrayed. He certainly lived the part. Give him credit.
Start buying his own line.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that you can see that happening for a lot of people out there.
Yeah. I interviewed Charles Lawton.
Really?
Who, if you asked me who I thought maybe was as great an actor as ever lived.
Yeah.
I saw him perform a one-man show once. I don't think anybody ever these days knows sort of who or what he was, but a magnificent actor, brilliant, a character, and he used to travel with a stack of books.
Was he the one who
do a one-man show of readings?
Was it Charles Lawton who was in Lolita?
I don't know.
The original Kubrick Lolita?
Don't remember Lolita.
Can't remember who that was. I'm confusing somebody here.
I don't think Lawton was in there.
It's another, I'm getting mixed up.
Do you know a film called Witness for the Prosecution?
Yeah.
Well, he was the plump English jurist.
Okay, it's not
got conned by Marlene Dietrich. Anyway, an interview had been arranged on the telephone. It's in the early days of they could make the phone broadcast.
Yeah.
And he was resting for his show that night at the London Little Theatre in the Grand Theatre in London, and we'd gotten permission from the theatre's maestro to do a radio interview on the phone with him.
Wow.
At 2:00, the phone was arranged. We phoned. The hotel where he was staying, operator said, "No, we can't put a call through. Mr. Lawton has said he can't be disturbed." Well, it's been arranged by so-and-so.
Yeah.
So, okay. They call him. "Hello. Mr. Lawton, it's Paul Soles at CFPL. Well, why are you calling me?" "Well, it's been arranged, Mr. Lawton, that we do an interview now for radio." I thought that. Oh, yeah. Well, it turned out that he was asleep. He said, "You've just wakened me from the first good sleep I've had in 3 weeks."
So he wasn't coming to play.
He gave me, instead of a 15-minute interview, 45 minutes.
Really?
That kind of a guy. I went backstage at halftime in intermission of this thing, and here at backstage, you know what backstage is, it can be kind of vast. Mm-hmm. One work light over the call board by a set of stairs, stage right. And here he is sitting, head in his hands, one old man, a briefcase open, a bottle of Crown Royal, or VO, or Seagram's VO. Mm-hmm. And I introduced myself with trepidation. "You're the manager, woke me up." Anyway, "I've heard of this theater. It's a wonderful little theater. They're great." Happy handshake. Just Giant.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Sitting alone.
Yeah.
I get shivers to think of meeting people like that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. You mentioned earlier about coming to play, and it's what something that when you see these interviews. This is a complete aside, but it's the two who I always loved on usually on Letterman. The two that were the magical, and always separately, but they always referencing each other, were O'Toole and Harris.
Right.
And Harris is the greatest interview I've ever seen.
Oh, he can be. Yeah.
The way he brings, the way he comes to play.
Oh yeah.
As a storyteller, and invariably would reference something about O'Toole, and then 6 months later O'Toole would come on the show and Dave would bring it up, and there'd be some debunking of it, or the two came to play together separately.
That's right.
And it's magnificent. O'Toole is probably my favorite performer.
Really?
Maybe of all time.
Really, because
of movie stars. Just there's something about. I think at a very early age, I saw. What was the one he did in the '70s, where he played essentially kind of a version of himself, an alcoholic, washed-up actor at the time. And I saw it at a very young age.
Yeah, My Favorite Year.
My Favorite Year. And I saw that at a very young age, and didn't know quite what I was watching, but it really left a mark. And then I saw, and then you grow up, if you're a kid who's around movies, and we were kind of a movie household. Lawrence of Arabia is always there, but I didn't watch it all the way through until I was much older. And it's the one for me. It's the Citizen Caine for me. It's all of that. That's
Why
the
not?
movie that is in my mind, the greatest movie ever made, in my opinion.
Yes, fair enough.
It does epic in a way we don't do today.
Right.
Today, epic is throw all these effects and everything on the screen, make it bigger and bigger, 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 bigger.
What is it?
Plant a camera in the right spot.
Artificial.
All the CG stuff, all the 3D stuff, all the
What do you
CGI
call
Max.
CGI, yeah.
Yeah, all that, yeah. And I've got a lot of room for it, but at the same time, real filmmaking, I think really strong filmmaking doesn't need to be that to create that effect. And that's what Lawrence of Arabia does. Lawrence of Arabia is an epic film, truly epic film.
True.
Where just because they know where to put the camera to give you that sense of vastness.
The great British cinematographer.
Yeah, I lose track of the names at this point.
Who?
Was it Deakins? No.
No. It'll come to you. But apropos of that, did you not like Goodbye, Mr. Chips?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
With O'Toole?
Yeah.
I still get tears when I think of that.
Like I just think everything.
It's brilliant.
And going back and reading.
Break your heart.
Yeah.
Oh.
And going back and reading about him, and now, I mean, even the what he did to him. I mean, then you get a better idea of he had plastic surgery to make himself into that movie star. He had his teeth, like he knew he wanted to be. He came at it from this very actory place, and somewhere along the way, when he saw that when movies were becoming what they were, he saw an opportunity to be. He had certain ingredients that could lead to that kind of movie stardom. And he did. He had his face tweaked a little bit, and he had his teeth tweaked a little bit, and so he embodied that kind of. He was, handsome as hell, all those things, and yet he was never quite that. He wasn't a Hollywood idol the same way some of these guys were.
No.
He wasn't any of those, but there was a part of him that wanted to be that, and I think that's the difference between him and Harris. Harris just he rolled forward with the tools that God gave him.
One of those tools was a cup of Scott.
Yeah.
This is not Scott.
No,
believe me.
No, it is not.
What is this? Pshachs. Do you know that word?
Anyhow, that's a total digression there, what you're talking about, the ones that come to play. And I feel like a rookie here. You held the job in broadcasting as an interviewer for 16 years.
Well, you talk about good luck. Again, good luck. You're sitting on the sidelines and these people are brought to you to interview. God.
Well, that's what I'm doing
Just
right now.
for fun, if you ever get a chance, I don't think you ever will. I know I won't anymore, but there's a guy I interviewed once, a close-up, sleight-of-hand magician with cards.
Yeah.
And I've worked with two now. Doug Henning.
Okay.
I did his movie, and we shot in Toronto here at the exhibition.
Okay.
And then this fellow on TV named, see if you know him,
Oh, God.
Ricky J.
No, I don't know Ricky J.
Short, kind of lumpy fella. He appears used to on the late night shows.
Okay.
Does a one-man show up close on a stage in the theater with cards, and he and I are sitting together like this close, and he asks me to, sign a card or something, and I was to put it back in my wallet, and he would do something else, another card trick, and 5 minutes later, he'd come back and say, "Oh yeah, you had a card, didn't you?" And he goes over to a watermelon or something and pulls it out of the middle of this. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Ricky J.
Okay.
If you ever get a chance,
We'll keep
talk
an eye out
about,
for
I mean, no, again, my good fortune. World-class skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I get it. It's and something like that. Like, we have a guy at one of the studios I used to work at who was an animator and a magician. And that always boggled my mind because those are two things. Animation is something that you kind of have to really bury your head into and give 100% to be any good at it. I'm not an animator per se. I've been a designer, but I never call myself an animator because that's a particular aspect of this craft that is so specific. Now, a magician, again, total dedication, so the fact that he can do two of these things. And we actually used to have a sign at the top of the stairs, "Please do not practice magic on the stairs." Because there was one time where he kind of took a little bit of a tumble. He was always distracted. He had these balls that he spins, these two glass balls. And he performs a little bit around the city, that kind of thing. But it always boggled my mind. Like, I don't have that kind of attention span and dedication to do that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing.
No.
I have to ask you about Wayne and Schuster. You says in your IMDb somewhere along the way that you worked with Wayne and Schuster at some point. And
I did 4 of their shows.
And most of the people out there probably have no idea who I'm talking about because this is the generation gap. Wayne and Schuster were again part of my wallpaper growing up, like Sunday night or whatever it was, the Wayne and Schuster show. They were a comedic duo who were on TV. They've been around for forever together. They came through. I don't even know when they would have started in TV.
40s, in TV right at the beginning, because they were well established, but they worked together for the Army show during the Second World War. If you know anything about Second World War battle history, Canadians broke out at a place called Falaise, the Falaise Gap, and the name of the town, Caine, C-A-E-N. Canadians were taking a pasting there, and there was a famous battle at an airfield called Carpiquet, C-A-R-P-I-Q-U-E-T.
Okay.
And Wayne and Schuster were there under fire during this battle. So they had real experience. Wow. Johnny was a little bit of a, what's the right word?
I don't know.
Prima donna? He used to yell at Frank Schuster on the set.
Yeah.
Johnny was short, and with the phobias that come with Napoleons, do things to make themselves. Anyway, a very, very funny and accomplished man, a brilliant joke teller. And
they were a riot.
If you could tell a good joke, you were okay with Johnny and Frank.
Because they put it in context, I guess they were of an era that, like, sort of. I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, so it was like the Carol Burnett show. Where it was a big show. They kind of were part of that kind of era of entertainment.
So-called variety television.
Yeah, they had a variety show.
Well, they had the record for the number of appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And they were one of those ones that they were so clearly Canadian, and their audience went beyond the borders of Canada.
No, they were kind of vaudeville comedians.
Yeah.
That's what influenced them.
Yeah.
They were in their, a little older than I, but at the end, when they were in the war, they had to have been 20, 21 to be in France. So, why did I bring that up?
Well, just the era that they were coming from, where it was informed by that vaudevillian tradition.
That's right. That's right.
And that is the tradition that moved in. And actually in animation, our seminal experience in the Looney Tunes, those kinds of that all comes from that vaudeville tradition as well.
Absolutely.
And it's part of the architecture. And I think when we have I find that there's a lot of
word.
And I find there's a lot we have in common. Those of us who are really on the animation side, like really embedded in it in terms of it's our lives, can sit down with comedians and share very similar senses of what we do. Because in my mind, like the few comedians that I do know in my personal life have the same kind of approach to their comedy that we have to our work. And it's because they study what's been done before, and they understand why these things work, and you really do take all this stuff apart before you can build it back up.
Sure.
And these guys, they're part of that. I mean, it was that era where also everything was done with a bit of a wink, and like they were almost naughty, but they weren't blue.
That's right.
You know, it was clean enough that I could watch it as a kid, but you certainly got a sense of a very adult world in all of it.
You want a joke?
Yeah.
I could give you one that I told Johnny that kind of got me inside the circle.
Okay.
But I won't because it's got a dirty word.
We can edit out if it's not appropriate. I want to hear the joke.
They told a wonderful joke too, but it was in Yiddish, sort of.
Okay.
I don't know if I can translate it. Which one do you want?
Give me whatever you got. I want to hear it. Whatever you got.
Two old guys in Miami Beach, retired in their 80s, just said to go out, have a walk, sit on the benches by the ocean and the highway. And a friend comes over, Harry, how are you? He says, I haven't seen you in years. How are you? You look good. He says, I feel good. Oh? How come? He says, I got a hobby. Oh, what's your hobby? He says, well, I'm collecting. Yeah, what are you collecting? He says, I'm collecting bees. Collecting, how many bees you got? She says, I got about 10,000. Really? Where you keep them? He says, in the cigar boxes. What? Cigar, I put the cigar boxes and tape them up, put them in the top drawer of my dresser. What? What do you feed them? She says, I don't feed them nothing. She says, do you drill little holes they can breathe? Give them water? And he says, no. Harry says, you got 10,000 dead bees. I said, oh, fuck them, it's just a hobby. But that word sort of, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay, it's okay.
But a more personal joke, this other one, if I may tell.
Okay,
because this is true. Johnny and Frank were graduates of Harvard Collegiate in Toronto.
Okay.
Very much that immigrant wave down in around the corner from Honest Ed's eventually.
Yeah.
A little before that. Very avid and loyal members of the Jewish community in Toronto, contributed to all the causes. And when the State of Israel was proclaimed, they were one of the early people who both had a dollar and an ability to get over to Israel and visit.
Yeah.
So they were being taken around in the old city of Jerusalem and went to the place with earthen floors and a high light, and the only source of light was light coming through this little window.
Yeah.
Earthen floors, an old, originally, supposedly the first synagogue in Jerusalem. And from the dusty background comes a man called the shamus, or the leader of the congregation, in physical sense, goes over to Wayne and Schuster, who are being escorted by a captain in the Israeli army. He's got his Uzi on his shoulder. And the shamus comes over to Wayne and Schuster and holds out his hand for a contribution to the congregation.
Sure, yeah.
The captain says to them, this is bad Yiddish. He says, die sind Schauspielers, der kennt nicht geben. Ich bin ein Soldaten, ich darf nicht geben. They're show business people. They can't give you anything. I'm a military man. I don't need to give you anything.
Oh, wow.
Now that's a Wayne and Schuster, Johnny Wayne joke. And it's a brilliant story.
I had to ask you about them. It was just such a favorite of mine growing up. My
Well,
mom watched it with me.
not better, but they were, Johnny being short and feisty, would always be ordering Frank around. Not always kindly.
Sure.
Frank was placid and sweet, put up with it. finally, in one of the last seasons, Johnny's chewing out Frank for this and that or whatever, and Frank stops and he says, "Johnny, you've been yelling at me for years. Gee, I wish you wouldn't do that anymore.
Really?
Please don't do that anymore." The entire studio, this is Studio 7, the biggest production studio at the CBC at the time, stopped. People were unwilling to draw breath. And every eye looked at Johnny. And he stopped and looked at Frank and said, "Sure, okay. Thank you."
Wow.
And that was it. And was talk about a stunning moment. Actually confronting the devil in a way. Whoa.
And they've had that dynamic for how many decades? Since
Well,
that surface.
exactly.
Wow. Yeah, no, those guys, they're absolute legends as far as I'm concerned. It's just
Well, they were a big name in show business. You bet. A big influence. Yeah.
Yeah, huge. Yeah. Well, that's very. I mean, so you said you did 4 episodes.
Yeah. I was given a nice compliment by Johnny. You know, he said I was too funny to be part of his regular company, which was a big compliment. I'm sorry I sound egotistical, but what the hell?
You're gonna steal the show.
No, but so I got an occasional invitation to do a part, and I had a ball. But there were some pair.
I get the feeling that Wayne and Schuster show was, at least in Canada, our real show business.
Oh, it was. Oh,
like
no question.
You got a sense they were having a blast.
Yep.
Probably a couple drinks.
Yep.
Like that whole era.
Yeah.
You know, that was when Carson was what Carson was down in the States.
They were big before Carson.
Oh, but like the part I was aware of.
Yeah.
You know, and because they come out in tuxedos.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was real show business.
It was formal. It was sort of the last glory manifestation of vaudeville.
Yeah.
And they wrote all their shows. They wrote their own songs.
The 2 of them. They had other writers though.
Not that I knew of.
Wow.
No, sir. They did it. They earned their bucks.
Wow.
And as I say, not always the nicest people at the Thanksgiving dinner, but what the hell? They earned it. They were legends. And I think you can tell, he knew how to tell a joke.
Yeah. Well, thank you for indulging me that one. That was for me. That was for my mom probably.
Okay.
I watched that with her, and it's one of those things that probably at 7 years old, I was probably a little young for their audience, but there was something about it that I just loved.
By the way, let me make this clear.
Yeah.
The joke about the bees.
Yeah.
That I got from Gordy Tapp.
Gordy Tapp.
I don't know if you know Gordy Tapp. Gordy Tapp was at one time the morning man at CHML in Hamilton. And became a very big TV personality. If you know the TV show, which was the southern redneck version of Laugh-In, Hee Haw.
Oh God, yeah.
Gordy Tapp was one of the...
He was on Hee Haw?
Oh yeah. Interesting guy, good promoter. But we used to have competition and meet a couple of times a year and trade jokes. And that one I got from...
Okay, nice.
No, I didn't get from him. I gave it to him.
You gave it to him?
I finally got... It was a competition. Yeah. Like your friends Harris and...
Yeah. And O'Toole?
O'Toole. Anyway, that was that. The one about the synagogue in Jerusalem, that's Wayne and Schuster.
Yeah.
But I told that bee story to Johnny, and that kind of got me...
That got you the in.
An earned mark. Yeah.
Gotcha. This has been fantastic. This is great. I could do this all day, but I think we're probably both getting
it's time
hungry.
for lunch.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Oh, totally. Yeah, very much so.
Good.
Very much so. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I will ask just a little last kind of a throwaway, and I don't want to turn it into another huge big conversation, but having survived in show business, having survived in broadcasting, and I think it's interesting that you do refer to it as broadcasting as opposed to being an actor or any of those kinds of things, because you've worn many, many hats. And having survived in a lifetime in Canada, which is not necessarily the easiest place to have done it, is there any advice to young people starting out, whether it be in animation, because whether we like it or not, we're actually part of this whole thing that is show business, whether we like to call it that or not, moving into a creative field? is there any advice beyond be lucky that you might share?
Well, I don't know if it's advice. I can only observe that, and I don't know that I earned anything special by my career. I don't think I shortchanged any producer. Except for lately doing a program called My 90-Year-Old Roommate, in which there are some blue words, yes, which my mother, every time I say them, I wonder, oh, sorry, Mom. I never sort of worked blue or needed to, and always respected the people who didn't need to, although always enjoyed those who could handle that language and make it as though it was the most natural thing in the world. To endure, I think, if you're professional and respectful of what you're doing and each other, never lose confidence. Really consider yourself fortunate to be part of a wonderful college of achievers who do things most people can't do. You know, when people say to me, I could never public speak or be an actor and get up in front of people, scared to death. Well, I have no trouble with it because it never was any trouble, but I understand why it would be. Mm-hmm. So my perverse way of saying, be respectful of those with that talent, because my greatest enjoyment has been being part of an acting company or a program in which you are playing with not only the pros, but the really good ones. Yeah. And I've had a couple of those moments. I have experienced flop sweat. And when you're with the really good ones, it is the reward of a lifetime. And it's no different from achieving something in animation, artistry, whatever. You're with the best in the field. And that, you will never not notice it, celebrate it, and thank God for it, because that's been my fun.
Perfect. That'll be our end note. Thank you very much.
Pleasure,
Paul.
sir.
This has been amazing. This has been a highlight for me, and a huge thank you to Paul for coming to the studio, for doing this with us and sharing his stories, and letting me geek out and get such a big kick out of it. That's it for this week's podcast.
Same time next week?
You want to come back?
Well, I want to see those molars. Bicuspids.
We'll book an appointment.
I'm sorry.
We'll book an appointment.
Okay.
Thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.